friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and I'm here for an update on the dehydrated cheese. This is a cheddar cheese and the dehydrated egg. These are the eggs from my own chickens that I did last fall, and about the same time I was doing the cheese so I could just give it a try. Now I have videos on both of these, so this video isn't going to be about how to do all this stuff, so I do recommend you check those videos out on the how-tos that I'll be linking to in the description box down below. Don't forget to click on either show more in all caps right down here below my channel name, or that little gray arrow over here on this side if you're on a smart device. So today's just more of an update to let you know how I've been using them, some plans I have still yet to use them, and how happy I've been with them, as well as how well they're holding up on the shelf. Now these two jars here, I never did vacuum seal. These are ones I'm working through right now. So obviously this right here are the eggs, and this right here is the cheddar cheese. I like using the coordinated colored plastic tops to help me differentiate, so if the writing wears off, it's still easier for me to tell what it is. And if you're interested in these lids, I'll go ahead and link to them down below. They're just cheap plastic lids, but I do like to keep some kind of silicone liner in there to keep it more airtight. Now right here are two jars of eggs that I did vacuum seal up, and they've been sitting on the shelf back there for some time. I haven't opened them up to check them because I'm positive they're still just as good as the ones that I haven't bothered to vacuum seal. So they've been sitting back there for at least 6 months now, and so far very happy. Now one of the reasons, even though I haven't done everything with these things yet that I wanted to do by the time I shot this video, I still wanted to get this one out right away because I want to remind everybody about how dehydrating eggs yourself is super easy to do, and it is a great way to be able to start putting up all those excess eggs you have coming in right now from your chickens. I love this. It's actually my new favorite way to preserve eggs. Now I'll still be freezing some eggs, not this year just because I still have a lot in the freezer from last year, but the frozen eggs that I like to put in the little quarter-pint jars, because I can put exactly 2 eggs in each one, those are perfect for using to make mayonnaise. So I find frozen eggs work better even than fresh eggs for making homemade mayonnaise. But the mayonnaise is the one thing I could not get to work with the powdered eggs, but everything else I've used the powdered eggs in has worked great. So I've used them to make pancakes, just regular scrambled eggs, scramblers where I add mushrooms, peppers, and onions and garlic and all that kind of stuff in there, and they work great for anything I need to use them for outside of having a fried egg or making the homemade mayonnaise. And it's great because I do not remember how many dozens of eggs I put into these 3 jars, but they take up so little room on the shelf. And unlike when you water glass eggs or do the lime water eggs, those can take up a lot of space in storage, yet this can be totally shelf stable without all those chemicals, and it just takes up so little room and super easy to use. So when I use the powdered eggs for making a scrambler or just regular scrambled eggs, I use approximately a tablespoon of the powder for each egg that I want to cook up, and about 1 to 2 tablespoons of water for each tablespoon of the egg, and that's going to depend on you how much you want to use. I suggest starting with 1 tablespoon and then seeing how thick that is, and then you can double that if you want. It's all going to vary. Typically what I like to do is add a little milk to it anyway, so a tablespoon of water for each egg and then the milk, or you can use just the milk to rehydrate the eggs in this case. Even if they seem really watery when you first pour them in the pan, they will cook right up and thicken up like a regular scrambled egg, as you can see in this picture right here. I have not, for some crazy reason, got any pictures of the scramblers I've made with them. I just keep forgetting, but the principle is the same. When I do a scrambler though, I do saute the mushrooms, onions, peppers, garlic, all that kind of stuff in the pan first, and once those are softened, I then pour the eggs over the top of that and then just cook them up like you would a regular scrambled egg. And the same goes when using in recipes for any kind of breads that you're going to use it in, whether it be a sweet bread like I have right here, I think it was apple spice bread that I made using the powdered eggs, or pancakes or anything like that. Approximately 1 tablespoon of the egg powder for every egg that you need, and a tablespoon of water. And again, you can adjust the liquid to suit you in each case as need be. Oh, and I've also used them in making cookies. I think it was when I made the pumpkin cookies. And that was pretty cool because in those, the last time I made the pumpkin cookies, I used the pumpkin powder from my own homegrown pumpkins that I had dehydrated up and then powdered, and the egg powder, and turned out just as good as the pumpkin cookies I made with more of a fresh type pumpkin and fresh eggs. So I am so thrilled with the dehydrated eggs. Now, the dehydrated cheese, though I really like it and I like the ease of using it, I wouldn't say I'm as thrilled about it as I am the eggs, simply because even when I used sharp cheddar to make this one, it still didn't have the strong flavor I would have liked to have had in a cheese powder. So I think the sharper the cheese is you get, the better you're going to be for making your cheese powder. However, I've still been using it and loving the ease of use. But when you're dehydrating the cheese, especially since a lot of the fat does come out of the cheese once you dehydrate it, not all of it, but a lot of it does, you lose some of that flavor. So you might have to add a little more salt to whatever you're using it in to help bring out the flavor of the cheddar cheese. Now, I haven't used this in a ton of stuff, but I have some ideas. I have made a cheese sauce out of it, which turned out excellent. That one actually had the best flavor, especially since it was easier to add a little more salt and whatever spices you want to get a good flavor. Makes a great cheese sauce, and you know what's going in it, and you don't have all those nasty preservatives that you tend to get in powdered cheese or cheese sauces. And so very good for that. You can sprinkle it on popcorn, and while it's pretty good, you might again need to add a little extra salt to bring out that flavor of the cheese powder. But the thing I've actually been using it in most and loving it for, because of the ease, goes right back to the scramblers I use the powdered eggs for. When I'm mixing up let's say I'm doing 3 eggs to make Patrick a scrambler, so I'll do 3 tablespoons of the egg powder, then I'll do 1 heaping tablespoon of the cheese powder and mix all that in together, and then of course add a little bit more water to help rehydrate both of them, so I can have cheese in the scrambler along with the other things. Now, I make scramblers as opposed to omelets because I just think they're easier to cook. I can be certain they're going to get cooked all the way through, and I'm not great at dealing with omelets, partly because I put so much stuff in it. They usually fall apart before I can get them to hold together well. So I'm sure these would both work good for making an omelet. I just like doing scramblers. Same flavor, just easier to cook up and not having to worry about it falling apart on you. Now, some of the ideas I keep meaning to try but then forget with the cheese powder is simply adding to some of your different breads. So let's say you're making up some cornbread from scratch, and you want it to go with a dish like maybe with your chili. Think of adding some of that cheese in there. So maybe, a couple of tablespoons per batch of cornbread. Same thing with your biscuits. So whether it be a biscuits and gravy kind of biscuit, or a biscuit you're serving with as a side to go with your soup or any other dinner, consider adding some of that cheese powder to that. I think that would add a nice flavor. Anyone who's ever eaten at a Red Lobster and had their cheese biscuits, that's kind of the idea I have in mind, except for this would blend better into the whole biscuit mix because it's already powdered, and you don't have to grate anything. You don't even have to grate anything to dry these up. I just chop them into little pieces when I go to dehydrate them. And by the way, when you go see that video, I show both ways, dehydrating them on an electric dehydrator, as well as using the rack that Patrick built me beside my wood stove. It takes a little bit longer doing it that way, but that's a way you can totally save energy, especially if you don't even have an electric dehydrator. Make yourself some kind of rack and you can dry cheese close to some sort of heat source, or even in your oven. And it's easy. You don't have to grate it, and that's the other reason I like this. I don't have to chop it. I don't have to grate it. Once it's all ready to go, I just take a spoonful or 2 or 3, whatever I'm going to add it to, and just use it. Super easy. And then another thing I did try was the last time I made the crescent rolls, the dinner rolls. I'm not talking about croissants. Croissants are different than crescent rolls. They have a similar shape though. But the crescent rolls, I did take a couple of them, and when I put the butter on the roll like I normally would on the wedge before I rolled it up, then I took the cheese and then sprinkled that over the butter and then rolled up the crescent roll and then baked it like that. And that did turn out pretty good. The same thing though, because the flavor is so mild, the thing I would do next time before I did that was just sprinkle a little bit of salt over that cheese powder when I add it onto the crescent roll. So I just did a few so I could try it. But again, I think it would be a really excellent addition to biscuits and cornbread and even your regular yeast breads that you're making, just like I did with the crescent rolls. That's why I tried it with the crescent rolls, because it was a lot easier. I already had to separate them out anyway to just do a couple like that. But you can pull out just a chunk of that bread, even if you're making loaf bread, and just try making a small little loaf or roll, mixing that cheese powder in there with it and seeing how that turns out. And that way you'll know for the future, you'll give you a better idea how much of it you want to add when you go to make a full batch, if you like the flavor of it, and if it's something you even want to continue. So anyway, there's just a few ideas, and I do hope to get eventually try these, and then I'll update you in a this and that video down the road whenever I remember to do it. And then one more thing I did want to mention is I was checking my wax cheese that I did back in September of 2021. And so this is 5 months old at the time that I'm shooting this video. And I was only just checking on it to see if everything looked good in there, which it did. But unfortunately, when I went to pull this one out of the box, a chunk of the wax had adhered to some of the cardboard. So when I pulled it out, it pulled the wax off. And I thought, well, I was going to wait about 4 months anyway to give this a try and see what I thought. Now this one is the pepper jack cheese, as I'm sure you can tell, and it definitely does have a much sharper flavor, and it seems quite good. Now when it comes to just snacking on cheese itself, I prefer a mild cheese, but whenever you're adding cheese to anything, like making a homemade macaroni and cheese, a tamale pie, anything where you're actually baking the cheese in there, a sharper cheese is much better for that. So I'm anxious to try the cheddar cheese, the mild cheddar that I put up in this same way, and then trying that in a macaroni and cheese or in my next batch of tamale pie, because I think that's going to just add so much more flavor when I go to make those things. So that's one thing about waxing cheese. And by the way, I have a video on this too, and just know I was totally new to this, and I did it a couple of times before shooting the video, but made some mistakes while shooting the video. But I thought it was good because I could share with you some of the things I did wrong in that particular batch. But now finally getting around to trying it, I think this is a really great way if you're wanting to just buy, because usually it's less expensive to buy like a more mild cheddar or jack cheese like this. And then if you're wanting it sharper, wax it and put it up into your food storage in a box somewhere on a shelf for up to 6 months and see, and then that will give it a much stronger flavor for using in your different meals. So best I can tell so far, at least with the jack cheese, I'm really happy with the outcome. And I will be again updating you more on the rest, because I'd like to let the rest sit for at least 1 more month before I try it. I was kind of shooting for 6 months. I was thinking a minimum of 4 months, but I'm like, I'd like to stretch it out 6 months before I try it, just to see how it turns out. And then I'll leave some for even longer. I'd like to leave some in there for up to a year and then try that and see what the difference is there. But it should have a very long shelf life if properly waxed, and you know, as long as you don't do one of these things right here. But it is a good idea to check on that cheese every so often if you do have it back in your storage. And I know people are going to ask me how long. Well, like I said, these have been back there for close to 6 months now, and I believe these should last for years, especially if you're keeping them in vacuum sealed jars like this. There's no reason why they should go rancid or spoil unless you're keeping them in a very hot place. If there's a lot of heat in that place, the heat can cause the fat in any of these things to go rancid, and that would happen with any of your fats you have in storage. Your peanut butter, your nuts, well, not coconut oil and avocado oil, but your olive oil and other types of oil that are not as stable as coconut and avocado. Any of those can go rancid if you're not keeping them in a cool enough climate. So a cooler pantry is really important when it comes to storing all this, but as long as it stays fairly cool for the whole year, it should last for years on a shelf. I can't give you an exact date, but when we think of non-perishable foods, which is what these are right here, then it shouldn't perish. And also to keep the quality and the color, it's also best to keep them from being exposed to much light, if any at all. So storing them in a box or putting curtains over your shelves if your room doesn't stay very dark, or your pantry. Those are some ways that you can keep these items dark. And remember, these were just done either on my dehydrator rack without electricity or on my regular electric dehydrators, not freeze dried. And I am loving how this stuff turned out. No need for an expensive freeze dryer that's noisy and big and requires a lot of maintenance. I can just use a regular dehydrator to do this, and I love it. It's great. So anyway, share with us your experiences down below. How have you used your eggs, your cheese, even your wax cheese? You know, have you done any experimenting with it, especially if it's anything different than what I've already mentioned? Share with us down below to give us some more great ideas. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.